us where that gold is, maybe we can all go home.
I'm doing my best to remember. I promise!
If I were you, I'd keep real still, Marie.
When the fighting is over, freedom.
Ne tire pas. Je suis résistante.
Then we're going to tar and feather that girl. She begged us to help her. Promised the major buried treasure.
We don't find that gold by sundown. This will not end nicely for you.
No gold, Major.
You're the one that told us there was gold here, Marie.
Vive la France!
Stay out! They here waiting for us.
I don't know.
She's a liar. Hitler's elite guard. Think there's a chance they just pass us by?
Hell no, they're coming. We will let you live. You gotta help us kill these Nazis. You said you can shoot. The question is, can you really? If we ambush them just right, they die.
Get in position!
We won't stand a chance.
Don't you see? She's using you.
One clever trickster, Marie.
Maybe we put down these guns. We all get a little piece of that gold. We got a deal?
No more deals.
Hi, everyone. Joel Searles here with the Samurai Pulse. I've got director Jesse V. Johnson with me, who's just completed his film Hell Hath No Fury. I got a chance to watch it here last night and really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. How you doing today, Jesse?
Good. Very pleased to be here, Joel. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Great to have you too. Let's jump right into it. You know, the story's, definitely got the action piece. It's got a heist piece to it as well. There's definitely some character twists that you don't always see coming. How did you find Hell Hath No Fury, and what was the process of bringing it to the silver screen?
Before COVID, funnily enough, I had put a call out because I had a source of financing that was quite small, but artistically it was open. You have choices in town. You can chase after the big budget movies, which tend to be very, very difficult to put together. They take a long time, and when they do get put together, you have very little creative say in it. And then you can do smaller pictures where perhaps the source of financing, you're familiar with the money itself, and they allow you to have a little bit more artistic expression, a little bit more freedom, and a little bit. So the final film represents a closer assimilation of your intended product. And I've had a bumpy go of it. 22 odd films. I've done 2 or 3 where, for one reason or another, I had very little control over the final end product. And ultimately what has happened is you've put a year of your life into a film, made a good film, and then watched as it was systematically dismantled and made into something else. Now, part of this is perhaps because my game isn't as good as some of the other directors. I could say that, if you're a truly articulate and truly manipulative and persuasive person, you might be able to have kept control of those films. Personally, I tried everything that was in my power, and I couldn't, and they went. So it's my fault ultimately. But every once in a while, you get the chance to make a film where you have creative freedom. And so I had a source of financing, but it wasn't an awful lot. So I put a call out for scripts. I went LinkedIn and Facebook and Inktip. I think Shark Tip was in there as well. They're different sources of where writers go to try and get their films made.
Right.
Explained very, 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 pragmatically, we needed a film with minimal locations, minimal cast, with no attachments whatsoever. Because quite often they come along and say, "Oh, it's just me, my friend, and the producer, and this guy's got a star in it, and we're ready to go." And it's like, no, I don't want any attachments. I want the writer. I will pay the writer cash or whatever it takes, and we will go make the movie. And that was the plan. And I got about 45 or 50 submissions, and I just kept coming back to Hell Hath No Fury. It had been translated from French very poorly. It was translated using Google Translate, so it was really kind of difficult to read. But there was something in there that just really appealed to me. It was almost like a knee-jerk reaction, a magical gut instinct that there was something there. He also had illustrated, pages within the script, which you never ever do that.
Yeah,
people, don't do it. It's so amateurish. It's so shit. It's totally lame. But they were very, very well done, and they're really nice. And funnily enough, my investor did not speak very good English. He could not read a script, and he took the script and went straight to the illustrations. The one thing that was supposed to, to can you and to make you look like you're amateurish actually ended up getting this thing, very, very close to being made. I showed it to a few of my friends. They said, "You're out of your mind. This makes no sense whatsoever." And I said, no, it was translated via Google Translate. And they're like, I don't get it. So I said, hold on. And I took a weekend, 72 hours, and I rewrote the script, from page to page, just translating it back into English and doing it, putting my 2 cents in, and then I handed that to my management, my writing partners, and they looked at it and went, we see what you're going for. We see why this appeals to you. And at that point, I had Catherine McEwen come in, who's a female writer who I work with a lot, who writes my female characters, and she got very excited and jumped in. She's also not American, and I think this film has a very international taste to it.
It does.
It tells World War II from a slightly different perspective. And there's nothing wrong with the traditional perspective we're all used to, very, very used to since Saving Private Ryan, which is basically dictated verbatim how war films are made in the US. Saving Private Ryan, you have the grumpy, hardened, older GIs, they're tough. You have the absolutely completely reprehensible SS, and
yes.
And they're all caricatures based on Saving Private Ryan. My DP and I watched about 25 medium to low budget war films just to get a little idea of what was out there. And we wanted to shoot yourself in the head by the end of it, because they're just people copying Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers. They shook the camera when the guns had to fire because they wanted to hide the fact they weren't, there was plastic and weren't really firing. And it was really depressing because the lack of ingenuity, the absolute lack of imagination, the absolute lack of ingenuity in storytelling, in script writing, in character building, in just picking up a bloody history book and having a look at what went on and not relying on television or History Channel. Actually take a read of what went on in warfare and battle.
Absolutely.
And it was depressing. So we threw all that stuff away and said, let's go back a little earlier. Let's go to the 50s and 60s when the films were being made by vets, who had that sort of taste of authenticity. Good, bad, ugly, don't give a shit. But their perspective was far more honest because they were basing it on their experiences in World War II, as opposed to, and I love Steven Spielberg and his films are beautifully made, but they are beautifully crafted masterpieces. And if you copy that, eventually you're going to be going inside, you're going to be like the snake eating its tail, which is what's happened with the genre at the moment. Even Fury, and Fury was an interesting take. David Ayer is a fantastic voice in filmmaking, but even the movie, it was Saving Private Ryan with the way the interplay, a little bit more swearing, a little bit grungier, but it was Saving Private Ryan with the same bad guys from Saving Private Ryan. It's amazing how little imagination is being used. Now, for better, for worse, we decided to go a different route. Now, our film is has its pitfalls, if you choose that methodology. It was written by Frenchmen. The French have a very it's a very complex relationship with America during the Second World War.
Yes.
What we like to think is the images of people getting bottles of wine and kissing GI troops as they came in. What we don't like to think of is the fact they did that a few years earlier as the Germans came in. And in Italy, it went both ways. I went to Naples, I spent a lot of time in Naples, and it was taken and retaken and taken again. And they hugged and kissed whoever was coming in and taking the town, because that's what you had to do to survive. And this part of history is a little more, people don't like to admit to that, or the fact that, when it came time to take retribution against people who had been a little friendly with the Nazis, they went straight for the women and the ones that couldn't defend themselves, beat them up, shaved their heads, kicked the shit out of them, tarred and feathered them, when in actual fact, the French had full regiments within the Waffen SS, that were fighting in they had the French flag on their shoulder strap. The last bastion of troops defending Berlin were French SS. And this sort of information is less. Hitler felt that his true embodiment was a Belgian SS soldier. A member of the Wallonian SS. Now these are historical facts. They're not someone making Hollywood movies. It's difficult to know how to get this information in. So going back to my writer, who was a Frenchman writing about the Second World War based on his grandparents' stories and anecdotes and memories, it's a lot more complex. The heroes were not necessarily unequivocally, without doubt, the Allies. Now, we all know that the Allies were the heroes. They went in and they stopped the genocide, they stopped the Germans, they did this. But to a Frenchman living in France, who's simply looking at how his day is going to proceed, whether he's going to get put against the wall and shot or not, it's a lot more complex, a lot more complicated, whether he's going to feed his children or not, how he's going to survive next month. In the midst of occupation, that caused a lot of complicated things to happen. And we're looking at those in this movie, and I find that far more interesting than simply painting one character who wears a white hat because he's a good guy and another one who wears a black hat because he's a bad guy.
Right.
What we deal with in Hell Hath No Fury, and what I feel war at its most dangerous is human characters, people, what that person is and what he is in his gut, and what he feels is right and how hard he decides to want to fight.
Right.
Great military leaders inspire, armies to fight by appealing to the characters of the soldiers themselves.
Right.
And I wanted to touch on that a bit. So the Allies in this are not necessarily the good guys. The Nazis are not. Nazi is not necessarily the bad guy. Each of these people is doing what he's doing for his own motivations, and he doesn't wake up in the morning saying, I'm going to be a bad guy today, or I'm going to be a good guy. He wakes up in the morning going, how can I survive the day and come out of it a little richer than I was when I went into it,
Richard III, Shakespeare kind of like doesn't, is living within the evil or the bad, but doesn't see that always above their heads.
No, and that honestly was what appealed to me the most about the script. It's a long answer because it's an easy question with a complex answer. What appeals to you about this? When I take on a film, I'm going to be living it for the next year. This one was particularly low budget, so not only would I be living it, but I'd probably be paying for some of it and doing a lot of it for free. And it was worth it. I'm very, very happy with the way the film turned out. It's unique and very much to my. I don't believe in political groups or parties or groups of people or countries. I believe in the force of the human spirit and the human condition.
Right.
The film represents that quite well,
It does. It drew me in very quickly watching it, and it made me think of like Kelly's Heroes and Where Eagles Dare. I
love those movies. He was so disillusioned after directing Kelly's Heroes, he became a real estate seller, the director in LA.
Really?
Yeah, it's a very strange story. He only died recently. But yeah, the studio took his cut away. Clint didn't side with him, which upset him immensely because he'd done 2 movies with Clint. Yeah. And he was so disillusioned and upset with the process that he decided to just go into real estate and did very, very well.
Wow.
But yeah, I love Kelly's Heroes. I found it wonderful. There's a couple of sort of over the top pastiches to the spaghetti western at the end while they're standing there, but I felt the film was very solid and good. Where Eagles Dare is phenomenal as well. These are films about people,
They are
characters, and I like that,
Combat and the Rat Patrol. Those are 2 TV shows from the '60s that had World War II or military veterans in them, and there were some elements there. Now Rat Patrol was North Africa, but nonetheless, it had like that flavor to it with the Jeeps and the vehicles and the, ambushing the Nazis. And
I haven't seen many of them. When I started out as a stuntman, a lot of the stunt guys I'd worked with worked that show, so I looked into it a little bit. But it's a bit before my time, and I know you can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah.
You're younger than I am, so. But
yes.
Yeah. No. There was, ultimately, I didn't want to be too influenced by any film. I went in there and we shot almost in chronological order. I called all of my friends that were home because of COVID, and I said, look, we're going to go make a film. We're going to bubble in this location for whatever it is, 2.5 weeks, and you guys are not going to be able to leave. You know, we're going to have to test every day. We're going to have to do all of this, but it'll be a hell of a picture. It'll be like doing a play, because you're going to get very, you know, rehearse. You'll get very deep into the characters, and you don't have to get out of your characters, because I'm going to put you up in a house which is across the street from the location, so you can stay in 1944. And they loved it. This is what actors love, and that's what they live for. So we shot almost in chronological order with one camera and a very small crew, and basically followed it like a documentary. You know, I told them where to be and what we're doing, and the special effects guys were very, very fluid, very safe with us. The guns were all real. They're from my collection and another friend of mine's collection that are converted to fire blanks. But basically, you know, everything you're seeing is the real thing. We had a lot of reenactors came in for the sort of battle sequence, and everything they brought with them was real as well. It was quite outstanding. It
was surprising what you had in there. And you know, one of my questions is on my list was, where did you find so many World War II era vehicles and uniforms? It was like
the uniforms weren't World War II, obviously, because they're too expensive now to do this sort of ridiculous. You know, a movie is very, very hard on everything. From, you know, it's, in my opinion, you know, you put a Thompson through a war movie, it's going to get more damage than a Thompson that went through World War II.
Probably.
If the guy survived. If he gets blown up with his Thompson, he'll get damaged. But because that soldier is desperately trying to keep that weapon clean, out of the mud, and protected. In a movie, you have an actor who cares not a shit for a weapon and will be dropping it and throwing it, and you know, plus it's firing blanks, which they weren't designed to do. You know, they were designed to shoot bullets, so the guns, you know, getting, you know, wrenched all over the place. So it's an interesting thing. So with the wardrobe, it had to be rented. One of the stipulations of my financier was that he wanted to buy a Willys Jeep. So I had to find him a Willys Jeep, and he got to keep that after the movie. So I don't know if he bought it with his money or with the financing money, or quite how that worked, but he got to keep the 19, I think it's a 42 or 43 Willys that we used in this. And he got to keep it, and that was his. So he was very, very happy. The motorcycles were from reenactors, and then we rented a military collector's hangar, and he's outside of California, had everything there, and we basically built the set for there, you know, and put it in there, so that huge half track, like the one from Dirty Dozen, is a real one. It's the only one. It's the only one in I believe it's one of the only ones in the US or something like that. But it's an amazing vehicle, and you know, everything around him, that was his museum, and we just made it look like the hangar. And then the Belarus footage, Belarus is where they have been making all of the World War II films for Russia since World War II. So they have an enormous, several hangars full of gear, you know, and then tanks and military vehicles. You know, I think we had 2 MP44s. They have a, you know, a wall full of them there. You know, this is a $30,000 transferable gun here in the US. So you know, that's the one that Tim uses when he throws it. That's a replica one that's getting thrown. But the firing one is a what's called a transferable NFA firearm, which you have to jump through a load of hoops to have, and consequently, it's extraordinarily expensive. You know.
Yeah.
So, it was fun to use all of these things in there, you know.
It's fun to hear about them, and to see the MP44. That was the assault rifle, correct? And
yeah, I think Sturmgewehr is literally assault rifle, isn't it? That's where the term came from.
Yeah, like storm weapon.
Yeah. So storm rifle. Yeah. So we had a guy called Hugh Daly, who I've known for some time, and he's a weapons expert, a historical expert, and a costumer. And he agreed to do the film, and he's very, very, very strict, and everything that the guys used had to be explained. For example, there's a scene where the SS officer is examining a particular medal, which he looks at and then decides not to wear. It's just an aside at the beginning of the scene, but that was the anti-partisan badge, and if you wore that, it was almost a death sentence if you got caught. You know, if a partisan caught you and saw you wearing the anti-partisan badge, it means you had killed partisans. So it was a bullet to the temple. So he looks at it for a while and then puts it aside and doesn't put it on when and it's not even mentioned in the script. And And then we have Tim, who plays Jerry, who carries an M3. It's a particular weapon that would have been 1 year old at that time and just been issued. It's a fighting knife that was the first of its type that was issued. He's also the one carrying the MP44, which we're presuming he would have taken as contraband from a German outfit, which did happen in France, and certainly something as unique looking as that might fire and might be a fully automatic, and would appeal to someone of that particular, Jerry's slightly nefarious criminal, mind. Likewise, Louis has a Walther P38 and the holster, which that holster is a real one that has been adapted to wear on a GI belt because the GI did exactly what Louis did in this movie. So we've played that angle a lot, and obviously the resistance troops would have a mix of whatever had been dropped to them and what they had taken or stolen from Germans. So we're very and the actual uniforms themselves, of course, the type of boots they're wearing, the cigarette brand that they're smoking. I know one filtered cigarette slipped in there. Of course, I've heard about that online. But the cigarette brand itself, which they all seem to miss, was absolutely dead on and perfect.
Right.
Unfortunately, when you're going through cigarettes on a film set and they're short ones, you're going through so many hundreds of them. One slipped in that hadn't had the filter cut off it. It wasn't long, but it was the right length. But unfortunately, it would have been at the very most a cork tip, which would have been inside the paper, so you wouldn't have seen it. But
right,
it didn't spoil my viewing.
Yeah, I didn't spoil mine. So if somebody saw it online, I stayed in the film. It didn't. The action sequences kept me engaged.
Phenomenal. The guys turned up. The guys that we had, they brought very, very interesting array of weapons, which the Waffen SS, who were retreating at that point back to Berlin, they were leaving because the D-Day landing had already happened. So they were fighting a rearguard action and running as quickly as they could back to Berlin. They would have had, a little bit of a mix of weapons, like the Luftwaffe weapons that were converted to ground use. You see an M15 in there. So it's pretty fun. I've seen a couple of viewers who said it doesn't seem quite right. It's like you want to go in the comment section underneath and say, I was the director, explain to me exactly what you feel doesn't seem right, quite right.
Yeah.
But that's okay. If a lot of these guys are even more disappointed when they can't find anything wrong with it. And you have to realize that too. But that was a part of the fun of making a film in the past, It's very, very interesting doing a period piece because you're like, for example, there was a scene where they had a picnic at one point, the Nazi officer and Marie. It's not in the movie. I didn't shoot it. We went a different direction. But while we were studying for it, it's like, well, what would they eat? They can't have sandwiches because there was no bread. There was no factory sliced bread. There was no bread available at that point. It would have been heavily, flour, water, and yeast would not have been available the way they are now, especially not in 44.
Yeah.
There would have been no jelly, because they didn't have jelly at all. There was no sugar. It would have been a plum, confection would have been a sugar plum, and suddenly as you start realizing, well, this is going to be really quite a Spartan picnic that they're taking, and how do we do this? But my point is, you have to research every, even a line of dialogue that seems obvious, like, he sets, they pull their weapons together. What are the weapons? What's the ammunition?
You're right.
Does it look, what kind of wire cutters would they use? It's a really fun thing to do. And I had a great art department on this one that really rolled their sleeves up and got excited and interested by it all.
It definitely shows. It definitely shows.
Fun to do.
What was, you've touched on some different challenges. What was the toughest challenge or challenges in filming Hell Hath?
On this one, honestly, COVID. Because everything else, because of COVID, made it easy, but COVID itself was just terrifying, because it was done right at the beginning when none of us were quite sure what was going on. And we managed to make it through the entire shoot. I think it was on the last day, the producer's daughter, and she wasn't working on the film, she was simply visiting the set, but anyone visiting had to have a test, suddenly came up as, the temperature was high and there was problems, and, they tested her, and the first test was questionable. And at that point, you're very concerned because that's almost, is it a shutdown? What's going to happen? The subsequent test, she proved negative, but that was really nerve-wracking. And we had machine guns and explosions going off. And theoretically, I'm going to keep this a bit vague. A lot of this sort of stuff, at time, we were being told there were roving sheriffs looking for groups of people, parties, and they were simply looking for large gatherings. We're there with machine guns and bombs and an entire troop of extras. And somehow this film that in my mind was 5 people in a single location had ballooned to 30 extras in full uniform and motorcycles and, and a battle scene. And it was only for 2 or 3 days that we had that volume, but my very, very COVID friendly script bounced a little bit out of control. And I just remember looking at Nina going, I thought we were making a tiny little drama piece here.
It's just 5 people on one location, and then they're, showing the SS and all their vehicles and stuff, and you're having to film and build a set. And so you had
armorers, on that sequence, just to keep the magazines loaded, and because they're running around with pouches on each side with, because I think we were shooting like 7 different calibers of blanks, which is, it's just a nightmare, so the safety with the guns is paramount. We had 4 special effects guys, doing wind with all the smoke, and then of course the dust, and then the explosions had to be set. And when you have more extras there, you have more wardrobe, more makeup, more PAs, more, so it's suddenly
it compounds,
and we've got to feed more people as well. And it was it was very, very nerve-wracking. So, on a normal shoot, that would be nerve-wracking, but when you're dealing with, sheriffs driving around looking for a reason to shut things down and write tickets and fine people, it was a very nerve-wracking, we forget now, but it was a very, strange period in time. They were finding people for children's parties in a front yard, if they came.
They were. Yeah, that's true.
So that was that. But really, the biggest thing was just getting the film made as well as we could in the shortest time, and making sure the performances were there. But this cast was so good. I was so lucky,
You were. And Daniel Bernhardt was impressive as a Nazi SS. He was smooth, very even.
Do you know how I reconnected with him? Because when I first started directing, actually, I hadn't even directed, I was writing. That someone came to me and said, if you write a script to one of these the best films, Daniel Bernhardt is the new one, and he's going to play it. And I heard this name and looked it up, and as it was, they went a different direction. And but he was the guy that could get the film made. Cut to, must be 20 years or 18 years later. And I'm with my friend Garrett Warren, who's making freebies, which are the stunt rehearsals. They filmed them, for the director. They're very, very high quality now. And they're shooting freebies for Wolverine, which Garrett is doing the action on. And the guy doubling Wolverine is incredibly good looking and moving absolutely, moving like a professional martial arts stuntman, with incredible flourish. And I stood and watched for about an hour, and finally I said to Garrett, who is that stuntman? He's probably one of the best looking and best moving guys I've ever seen. And Garrett said, that's Daniel Bernhardt, the guy that used to be a martial arts star. And I said, how's his ego? What's he like? He's doing stunts. He said, he's incredible. He's the nicest guy you'll ever meet, doesn't care, just happy to be here, enjoying himself. And cut to a few years later again, and another writer said, you have to meet Daniel Bernhardt. He's working with 8711 now. He does all of their films, John Wick and Atomic Blonde. And, he's one of their top guys.
He was in The Matrix as well. I think it was Agent Johnson was his character.
So I met with him. We had a 3-hour conversation. He's one of the most interesting fellows around. He speaks German, French, and English. And I thought, wow, if I ever have a part that requires German, French, and English, you're the perfect guy. And he's a very charming man. And ego is not even on his. It's an amazingly in check ego. I don't know how he does it, because my ego gets out of control. I've done nothing. You get one little bit of success and you think you're a superstar. But Daniel has been to the top of almost the top of the ladder, and then been knocked back down again several times, and is just one of the nicest human beings you'll meet. And it was probably a month or so after the meeting that COVID hit, and another month after that this script came in, and it requires someone who spoke English, French, and German. And it's like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Perfect, yeah.
And each of the characters in the script, the way they were described were people that I knew. It was uncanny. The way that the French resistance fighter that Dominic plays was described, as possibly an ex-legionnaire, a boatman who's tough. He's shorter, than most of the other guys, but stockier and stronger, and has hands like a blacksmith. And it's like, this is Dominic Vandenberg, and he was an ex-French Foreign Legion. He was in Deuxième Rep, which is the paratrooper section of sort of special forces section of the Legion Étrangère, and a dear friend of mine. And so I said, I'm not going to call him because it's too obvious. I'm not going to do it. And we kept going through casting. It's like, oh God, he's perfect for it. And I called him in, and he I think he killed it, you know. He plays the one that has, you know, gets slapped by Nina and cries, and the younger of the brothers, or the more psychopathic of the two.
Yes, the tunnel rat.
Exactly, is the little badger.
I didn't really see him coming, and then, you know, through the film, it kind of progressed. We had more and more of a role and responsibility. I was impressed of his character, kind of like, you know,
yeah.
It seemed like more of the soldiers and obviously the SS were going to be involved, and then this Frenchman who, you know, I don't want to spoil it, but he comes along and has a much larger, more impactful role.
There's a saying, you know, somewhere in Chekhov or something like that, where you introduce your characters, you foreshadow them in the first act, and you have them. I have always loved films where a new character appears somewhere around midway through, and if he's interesting enough, he can add a little bit of spice to the film and pep you up. And it's like the Shaggy Dog story that starts with the Shaggy Dog and the owner, and by the end of the story, you've got all these new characters. Or my favorite, the outlaw Josie Wales, where you start with him on his horse, and by the end of it, you've got him on the horse, the old woman, the young girl, the Indian, the Indian, and I find that really exciting. I think it's almost like the Iliad. There's something in Greek storytelling that probably affirms it. But yeah, Dominic's character comes in quite late in the film, and I think it's perfect, and it feels organic and smooth and interesting. And
it does. You know, for our last question here, and thanks for all of that. Actually, 2 more questions. What are you most proud of the film overall?
Okay, I'm going to speak as a third person, because obviously you can't say what I'm proud of really without sounding like a complete jackass, you know. My English upbringing says, well, I'm just happy I made the film and hopefully everyone enjoys it. The truth of the matter is I'm very fucking proud of the film. It was extraordinarily difficult to make, an amazing challenge. It looks so much bigger than it actually was. The performances are outstanding, all of them. I don't think there's a bad performance in the film. But what I'm most proud of, and this has been something that, it's the complex payoff at the end of this film is what I'm most proud of. The last shot of the movie where we realize that it's a spoiler, so you know, I don't know how important that is to people, but up to this point in the film, the motivation has been greed, revenge, ambition, hatred, anger, and these are all perfectly acceptable as motivations for a movie in the 21st century. I wanted something a little bit more interesting. I wanted something that touched on a state of grace, you know, the better in mankind, because this movie is so unpleasant, so nasty. You really want to shower after some of the events, because how grotesque. You know, she's strangled and slapped and thrown in the dirt. This poor girl has her head shaved, you know, and it's just the treatment she gets is so humiliating. I needed the resolution, the denouement, the finale to give the audience something life-affirming, and I think we pulled that off. And I think Nina pulled it off with the way that she played that part. She's, you know, if you watch it closely, she's limping at the beginning and in great pain, and is beaten to hell, and she's exhausted and tired and emotionally exhausted. And you watch on her face and nothing else as all of that washes away, and she realizes she's pulled it off. She's pulled off what she wanted to do, which is not having money at all, just make sure no one gets that fucking gold. And she smiles about it. She realizes she's done it, and it's in the bag, baby. And that smile on her face is the one we freeze frame on when we give a little bit of her, you know, what happens to her after the war, and how she lived a life of peace and generosity. And for me, that's my greatest achievement, because it's easy, you know, I've made films about revenge, I've made films about comeuppance and, you know, people stealing money, and it's, you know, I find all that interesting, but it's very teenage. You know, what happens as you get a little older is you realize there's more important things to life. You know, there has to be something that transcends gold, money, ambition, greed. You know, there has to be something that transcends that. Otherwise, what are we? We're nothing more than rats. You know, we're the killer ape. We're also a thinking ape, and we, as well as killing, we're capable of enormous acts of creativity and generosity and philanthropy. And I think that's what we should. You know, listen, this is getting a bit highfalutin here and a little off course, but yes, that's what I'm most proud of, is that last shot in the movie when, you know, the film aspires to be something more than just a base, you know, film about.
Absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
What are your future plans and goals?
There's about 18 films on the whiteboard. I have an assistant who comes in every day. We're working out which one is in, they're in active development, post-production, paid up development, not paid development. And we basically, at the moment, are going through all of those, making sure the scripts are right, some are being cast, offers are going out. There's another historical piece like this one that is an ambitious piece that I've sort of harbored for almost 20 years, which looks like it's going to get made in the summer. It's set during Roman occupation of Britain, and yes. It's a pretty wonderful piece. It'll probably kill me physically, financially. I don't know. Who cares? I like to aspire to the fact that I also have other films that have great casts in them where I can make great paychecks, and those ones must pay for the more ambitious artistic ones. It's a balance,
Very Francis Ford Coppola, Andy Vanya of you.
I love Andy Vanya. I used to know him very, very well. Bless his heart. God bless him.
Absolutely.
My ex-wife swam at his house when she was pregnant in his swimming pool, and he was an incredible inspiration. If you can, you balance those two. I'm lucky enough at the moment that I've been able to do it a little bit. Earlier on in my career, I made a passion project that was in black and white. It won 42 film festivals, but didn't make $1. And I'd spent 2 years on it. And you look at yourself, and you look at your family and my beautiful children, and you realize I've literally not made you any money in 2 years, guys. And it's nerve-wracking. And then you run around desperately trying to find a paying gig, because I obviously with a film like that, I was making money on the back end of the film. And so I've become a lot more careful now. I have an assistant, and I pay her, and I have a management, and I'm represented by quite high level agency, which is wonderful. After all this time, and all of us balance. Obviously the agency and the manager are very interested in the ones that make them a good chunk of change, and then myself and my assistant are looking at the ones that are sort of more artistically rewarding, and you try and balance between all of them and choose very, very carefully. You have to be careful not to devote yourself to 9 months to something that at the end of it is not going to pay you or be artistically satisfying. So it has to be one or the other.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for your candor there.
Or both, hopefully. So I had a couple of meetings with them because I like to meet the older guys that have been doing this a long time.
Yeah.
I'm 50 now, so I can hardly say that much older. But Moshe Diamant and Craig Baumgart and these guys that and you spend an hour with them, and it's something it does. It lights something. What you're learning, probably doing what you're doing here.
Yeah.
It lights something, and you see. There's a myriad of ways of skinning the cat, and you talk with these guys, and you realize they came up with something back then that worked, and it's like and there's so much to learn from it. We do, as I was complaining about everyone copying Saving Private Ryan, we do as an industry tend to copy ourselves terribly.
We do.
And the people I love, and I keep going back to it, filmmakers like John Ford, Marion C. Cooper, Howard Hawks, Raoul Walsh, Frank Capra, Peckinpah. These guys all were either in the military or were actual bona fide adventurers. Raoul Walsh, filmed a film riding with Pancho Villa about Pancho Villa in 1912. He rode with him. He gave him $500 in silver to keep him alive, and filmed this film of it was the trail from Ciudad, from northern Mexico all the way to Mexico City, where they shot and killed and rampaged and fought with the troops all the way to Mexico City. And I mean, it was and then Marion C. Cooper explored the Arctic and biplanes. Ended up producing King Kong and Stagecoach.
Yeah.
But they were adventurers, and their films were based on the people they had met and the incidents they had encountered that blew their socks off. Women that they had met, women that were powerful, interesting, funny, alive, alert, and this is the kind of filmmaking I want to do. And they say that Peckinpah based his blood hits that he saw on the people he saw getting shot from a train in Korea, and the first time he saw blood spurting, and he described it to a friend in a drunken moment, and it's But if you watch his films, you'll notice something very interesting. He slows down everything except for the actual blood hits. Whereas you watch John Woo, he slows down everything, including the blood hits. And it's only a small thing, but it becomes very, very obvious when you watch Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, Wild Bunch, Major Dundee, or these pictures all back to back. You realize it really was a choice. He doesn't actually slow down the blood ever. It's only the going up to it and coming after it, which I found very interesting on a study afterwards.
That is.
Because he was making films that he was desperately trying to be anti-war and anti-violence. He loathed it so much.
Yeah.
Interview with him where he said he wanted to vomit when he heard that people were celebrating the violence in the Wild Bunch. He said, I failed miserably with this. I'm a complete fucking failure.
Wow.
A little bit prone to hyperbole, but it is interesting.
Yeah.
So that's where my study falls.
Peckinpah, he was a Marine. I believe he was a Marine there in Korea.
Yeah. Yes.
And The Getaway, Junior Bonner.
They said his method on set with crew members was the Parris Island method, which was you pick one person out and you ream him, and everyone is so terrified of being that one person that got reamed, they all kick into line. But they called it the Parris Island method, and you didn't want to be that one person on set.
You don't want to be that guy or that gal.
Yeah. And even if you hadn't fucked up, if there was a lot of stuff going on, you might be the one that got chosen to get reamed.
Mm-hmm.
Which I always found interesting. So yeah, Parris Island. So that would have been Marine Corps. Yeah,
definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time, Jesse. This has been great and wonderful to know you're so well versed in the classics, which it does come through in your current work. It did come through in Hell Hath No Fury, because on a gut level while watching it was like, okay, he knows history. He must be a fan of some of these cool World War II cinema films. But you weren't repeating what they did.
Do you know the one that I had all the crew watch before we started was Come and See? That one I had them watch it because I said, I don't want you aping any of this horseshit that you saw on Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers. Love them. Fantastic movies. We're not competing with those. And I made them watch Come and See. And when DP came back to me, said, I haven't slept for 2 days, you bastard.
Wow.
Setting rather a lot, but the actors got it. They understood what I was, I have seen that.
I have not. It's actually, I've heard of it, but I've never seen it. Who's in it?
Well, it's a Russian film. Funnily, it's not Russian. It's Belarus. Funnily enough, the filmmaker, the director, had been a villager in one of the villages where the scorched earth was practiced in World War II, and had been, his entire family had been wiped out as the SS worked their way through it, and they would have penal detachments like these detachments full of people that should have been in prison, that were tasked with getting rid of these villages in Belarus, which is also where we shot some Hell Hath No Fury. But it's a very stark look at World War II, and conveyed and told almost like a horror film. And it's, for anyone who is a study of World War II films, it's a must-see. You have to watch it. It is not a date movie. It's not a feel-good movie at all, which is what I think war should be advertised as. It's,
right.
I don't think you should ever see bullets fire and no blood. I don't think you should see a knife stab and a guy goes, like that, and falls down and dies, because most of the time you don't die from being stabbed.
No, you bleed out. It takes a while.
If you read On Killing, the book on post-traumatic stress disorder by the Israeli
Lieutenant Colonel Grossman.
Yeah, he describes the absolute worst, the worst case of PTSD coming from encounter with a bayonet or a knife. It never leaves you. It never goes away. It creeps up on you in the dark, just when you think you've outgrown memories of what happened. And he describes it beautifully in that book. And that was what I wanted the guys to have been through. And I talked to them an awful lot about this. I said, you're not bad guys. Not one of you in this movie is a bad man, is a truly wretched human being. You're all guys who are damaged goods. He says in the script, they fought their way up from Italy. You're a study of history. I don't know if you've read much about the battle up from Sicily on that rear.
I have not.
It was a meat grinder. It was absolutely unbelievable. You had Fallschirmjäger, who were, the shock troops of the SS, the paratroopers fighting a rearguard action through Monte Cassino and all the way up through Italy, just slowing down the Allied advance. And they would go backwards and forwards and backwards through a town. And the killing was unbelievable. The first special service force, the combined American Canadian special forces saw a lot of action there as well in the mountains. It was hell on earth. Sicily, Salerno. Have a read of it because it's shocking stuff. And by the time they got to southern France, where they were still fighting, by the way, they had to fight from the south in. There's not much made of it because everyone's very interested in the Normandy landings. But the Normandy landings happened, and then of course they came in from the south as well, the Allies. And there was a lot of fighting down there. We visited south and France and
Anzio. I know Anzio was a failure.
Yeah,
that landing at Anzio was like bad.
Yeah, it was truly. There's parts of American history that we don't go near in school. Yeah,
right.
I noticed it with two kids. These boys in my movie have gone through that, which is why they are what they are.
Yeah.
And I had Tim and Louis, the two actors,
yes.
look at examples of post-traumatic stress disorder in soldiers and what it does and how it will affect you in your decision-making process.
It does, definitely.
And it was interesting to me. So that's a little bit more history on it.
Learned a lot from this interview, more than I ever thought. You're walking.
You have a fantastic regiment there with an incredible history. That's really, you guys fought your way down to the halls of Montezuma in Mexico City too.
Yeah, the Marines. We've stormed a lot of beaches, and we've definitely lost a lot of people. But we've won a lot of battles in the island.
It was the year before the California Gold Rush, which is interesting that you were in Mexico City.
Yeah.
46, 47, and then 48. The particular regiment has a fantastic history, and there's lots of really, really interesting pieces there.
Even in Vietnam, the Marines had. Have you ever heard of a CAP, Combined Action Platoon?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so you likely, as a lover of history and military history, you probably understand like what a Green Beret, what the Special Forces concept is. An A team goes in and they live in a village and they train the villagers to fight against the Viet Cong or against the Taliban or whoever. The Marines did a similar thing where they sent like half of an infantry squad or an infantry squad of like 9 Marines to live with the villagers throughout southern Vietnam. And they were called CAPs, Combined Action Platoons. And they like embedded and did similar work as the Special Forces.
One of the scripts that I sold was on a guy called Larry Tornay, who was a Finnish soldier who was part of a advisory in the early days of the Vietnam War, 60s. But he was special. An interesting fellow. He won the Mannerheim Cross as a Finnish soldier. He won the Iron Cross as a Finnish SS soldier. And he won, he was one of the first Green Berets in Vietnam by act of William Colby, who was head of the OSS, which became the CIA later,
Right.
It allowed this group of Finns who had been, in the SS into the US Army. There's a building named after him at Fort Bragg. It's pretty cool.
That is. I'm going to look him up. And
he bought the script?
You can send me the script, sure.
No, Dolph Lundgren bought the script.
Oh, Dolph Lundgren bought it.
Yeah,
Interesting.
He's an avid student of history, and particularly of Larry Tornay, because Larry Tornay was a Finn and Dolph is a Swede, and the Scandinavian aspect would appeal to him.
Yeah.
And if you look at a picture of Larry Torn towards the end of he was he was an MIA, KIA. He was missing in action for quite some time, and in the 90s they found his body. But if you look at him, he looks actually like Dolph Lundgren, which is pretty crazy.
That is.
Not many people look like Dolph as well.
No.
But the last film I did that's just getting finished at the moment, White Elephant, our second bad guy was a scout sniper. So he has a tattoo on his neck with the 2 S's, and it was an interesting bit of research we did on this fellow, the writer.
So the actor or the character of the actor playing?
The character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I'll check that out too. I saw that on your IMDb credits. I went through and looked at them, and you look like you got your start on Paul Verhoeven's Total Recall, which that would have been really cool to work
I
on.
was 16 and in Cherubusco Studios in Mexico City. It was I thought it was the greatest thing ever. I had done my potential recruit course with the Royal Marine Commando. I'd done very, very well. But I had hurt myself. I would worn a new pair of boots, which you never do before a long distance run. And so I fucked up the back of my ankle, so pretty badly done. And I consequently spent the night in hospital. And my uncle had come to me, who was running Total Recall, and he said, "You're an absolute idiot. Come work for me. If you're gonna do this kind of work, don't join the Marines. Come and work with me and do stunts." I was very, very skeptical of it, and they handed me the little envelope of money when I got there, and I counted the money, and it's like, it's not that much more than a month in it's and so I about 3 days in, I was talking to one of the other stunt guys, and I said, I got to tell you, I really love the Marine Commando. I love everything about it. I want to parachute, I want to ski, I want to do all these wonderful things that they offer you to do, and and I like the whole idea of it. And I said, the money we get here, it's not that different. He said, "You idiot, that's your per diem. The paycheck is this one." And that was the end of that particular Marine Commando.
Wow. Yeah, the Royal Marine Commandos, I mean, that's like the special forces of the British military. They're a lot smaller force than the Marine Corps. I think they're like 6,000 or 8,000. The U.S. Marine Corps is 107.
I was 17 years old. I'd done good in it. I was running like crazy, and the Mountain Arctic. I was a cadet, so the mountain. I was very interested in the Mountain Arctic Warfare Cadre section of the Marine Commando, which I don't know. I don't know if I'd have been suited to it.
A little chilly.
You don't know. You don't know when you look back. I would have loved to have done it, but another lifetime. I'm destined to make movies about war and soldiers now.
It's a great place to be. I actually know some Royal Marines.
I know a lot of them now, man. I have one of the guys that backs me for my knives makes the commando dagger that they carry, and they do a custom one, ex-Marine Commando. And I'm still friends with the guys that went in when I went in, and they're all in civilian life now, flying helicopters or interesting lives. Or it's a, but your path in life is not chosen the same way that you think it is when you're young. And my path was different, and I don't regret a single beat of it.
Yeah, you shouldn't. You've applied the same work ethic you would have as a Royal Marine, and you've had great success in a very difficult and cutthroat business. So
it's an interesting thing. I'm glad I did all of that, because it sort of grounded me enough in it, and I'm glad I didn't do it, because it left me with a wistfulness and a sense of longing and wishing that I had done it, that makes me make these kind of movies.
Yeah,
a lot of the guys I know that went through special forces, they're done with it. They don't really want to write movies about it anymore. It's like they've seen it, they've done it, and a lot of them aren't allowed to talk about what they've done anyway.
Right.
And so it's like, I can do it. I never did anything, so I'm fine. I can make whatever a movie I want and to be done with it. And I get to hire all these guys and put them to work and chat and get to pretend to do it without the worry of getting shot by a real AK-47.
That's true.
I think it's okay for me. It's all right. It was the way that life intended for me, and that's good. But I am very careful to do them justice, to be to do my research, to read up on it, to bring in technical advisors whenever and if possible, and really sort of cover myself on that respect. I think you have to do that. That's the part that you
integrity of the project, or a artistic integrity of like accuracy and representation. You should. Some people don't, and it shows in their movies. You're kind of like, okay, that looks terrible. Even before I was in the service, you could tell.
Of course you can.
When somebody had, they must have had some police people on this, or some fire or military. And then when they don't, they do stupid things that just don't make any sense. Thank you for your time today, Jesse. It's been a pleasure, and great to hear all of your stories of being on set and the history and the research that you did to make the film, and to hear about your upcoming projects, which I think you said you had 18. So looking forward to seeing those, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you for having me. Thank you for putting up with me, and looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.